Welcome to the first video in this Getting Started series. In this video, we're going to show you the basic tools to get you up and started quickly with your Vectric software. Whether you're using Cut 2D Desktop, Cut 2D Pro, VCarve Desktop, VCarve Pro, or Aspire, this video is going to be applicable to you. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create this Welcome to Our Home sign from scratch. Let's go ahead now and jump into our software and get started.
This may be your first time ever using one of Vectric's software packages, so all of this could be very new to you. To make the process as user-friendly as possible, we'll take you through the steps to create a very simple and easy project. The end goal is that after watching this video, you can make a similar project from scratch. Over the applicable Getting Started videos for your software package of choice, we'll build on these basic concepts and tools. The first thing we're going to do is create a brand new file. So we'll click on the Create a File. Now this is our job setup. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a job that is roughly around the same size as the piece of material that I'm going to use to cut my job in. So it's going to be a single-sided job. We're going to have a job size of 11 inches across by 6 inches tall. And our material thickness is going to be around 0.75 inches thick. Now we're going to verify all this later before we actually go ahead and create our toolpaths. So right now we're just kind of setting this up as a good place to start. Obviously we're going to be using inches as our units. We're going to be zeroing our tool off the top of our material, and you'll see me do that later on in the labs when we go to cut this project. We're going to set our XY datum position to the bottom left-hand corner. This is where we're going to start our job from. So we're going to set our tool at the bottom left-hand corner off the top of our material before we start to run any tooling. We're just going to go ahead and click OK. We'll have a quick look at the basics of our interface. If you want more information on all the ins and outs of our interface, I suggest you look at the related videos that we've attached to this Getting Started video, or you can have a look through your tutorial browser for the video called How to Use the Interface. On our left-hand side over here, we have all of our design tools in our Design tab. We also have access to our layers and to our sheets. In the center of our screen right now, we're viewing our 2D view. It's a top-down view of our design space. We also have access to our 3D view, and we can use our view control over here to look around that, or we can also use our right mouse button if we want to. Let's go ahead now and look back down on the top of our job. We can go and flip over to our Toolpaths tab, and in our Toolpaths tab we have access to our material setup and also all of our toolpath operations. Let's go back to our Design tab. Okay, to get started, we're going to need a rectangle. So to do that, we're going to go over to our Create Vectors section of our Design tab and choose to draw a rectangle. So I'm going to click on that, and then right in the 3D view, I'm just going to draw a rectangle that's approximately the size that I need. And you'll notice that at the very bottom, in the edit box, we have 9.9 selected. So I can go ahead right now and type into that field. So I'm going to type 10, and then press Tab on my keyboard. And as soon as I do that, it's going to move me on to my next edit box. And in there, I'm going to put 4.56 and then press Enter on my keyboard. And that's been resized for me. And I can press Escape to exit out of that form. Now, that looks exactly what I want, except for it's not centered in the actual 3D space. So to do that, I'm going to go over to my Transform Objects section of my Design tab and choose the Align Selected Objects tool. And in the top section of this, I'm going to choose to align the selected vector to the center of my material. So I can just click that, and then I can close that down. Now I like to modify this rectangle a little bit. I like to make the corners more of an inverted sort of circle look to them, like a lot of plaques do. So to do that, with that rectangle selected, I can go back into my rectangle tool, and I can go ahead and use some of these handles that we can see in our 3D view. And the one I want to look at is this one right here. I can drag that inwards to create a radius like so, or I can pull it the other way and create an internal radius. And so I want to type in an exact measurement for that. So as soon as I get it in a state that it's going in the right direction, I can let go of my mouse, and you'll see that the edit box is now selected. I can put in minus 0.75 of an inch, and then press Enter, and you'll see that it modifies all the corners of my rectangle. And that's perfect. So I'm just going to press Escape on my keyboard again to close down that form. Now the next thing I want to do is to create a border. So I'm going to offset this rectangle in a certain distance. Now to do that, I'm going to go down to my Offset and Layout tools and choose the Offset tool from there. I'm going to go ahead and offset this inwards a distance of 0.325, which is great. I want to make sure that I create sharp corners, so I get these nice sharp points on this internal offsetted vector I'm going to get. And I want to select the new one. So I'm going to go ahead and choose to offset that, and you'll see now I have that done for me. So I can go ahead and press escape or close on that form. The next thing I want to do is to add in some text. So to do that, I'm going to tile my views, and you'll see that I have my 2D view on top of my 3D view. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit on the 2D view with my scroll wheel of my mouse. Now I'm going to add in some text. So we're going to go over to the Create Vectors section of our Design tab again, and we're going to choose to draw some text. Now from this form, I can either choose to draw text just as it is, or I can add it into a box. I'm just going to use the first option, and I'm going to type in the text that I would like to have on my sign. So it's going to say, "Welcome to our home." That looks good. I want to make sure that it's the Candera font, and I'm going to go ahead and choose to bold that. And that looks great. We're just going to press close here and get out of the form. Now I like that. We're just going to go ahead and center this inside of this box. So again, I can go over to my Transform Objects tool if I'd like to. Click on the alignment tools, and I'll just center that in the middle of my job and press escape to get out of that form. Now what I'd like to have really in the end is this "to our home" text line up, the T line up with the front of the W, and the E line up with the end of the E in welcome. And to do that, I'm going to select my text, right click on that, and I'm going to go down to Convert to Vectors. Now keep in mind, as soon as I do this, it's not text anymore, so if there's any spelling mistakes or anything like that, I won't be able to correct them, or if I want to change the font, that'll be impossible. But I'm happy with everything, so I'm just going to go ahead and convert that all to curves. And I'm going to off-click everything in the gray area. And you'll see now I have all of these individual curves, along with the O is broken up into two pieces, and the R is as well. So to make my life easier, I'm going to marquee select all of the text in welcome, right-click on that, and go down to Group. And I'm going to do the same thing with "to our home," right-click on that, and then go down to Group. Now what I want to do is just click on the "to our home" again, and if I grab the handle up here in the top right, hold down my Shift key, I can scale this down, and its focus point is to the center of that text. So I can easily just go in and size that down. I'm just going to eyeball that. That looks really good. I can use my cursor keys to nudge that text up into place. Then I can go ahead and marquee select all of that text again, right click on that, and group that together. That way, when I select the text again, it's all one thing. Go ahead and we'll recenter that in the center of our job. Okay, press escape again to get out of that form. I can go ahead and select that text, hold down my Shift key, and again, use one of those top corners to scale it up until I get it the size that I would like it to be. I think that looks really good right there. That's perfect. So let's go ahead and maximize our 3D view again. Now, I realized at last minute that I'm going to need to put in some holes here so I can mount this to a wall. And right now, if I use this vector here to profile cut this shape out, I'm not going to have any material to put a screw hole in. So lucky for us, if I reselect this rectangle, I can go back into the rectangle tool. I can remove those radius corners, just click apply. Then I can close this down, and it's back to its regular normal rectangular shape. That's only possible because I didn't change that vector in any other way except for scale it a little bit and use the features of the rectangle tool. I didn't break it any at all, so the software still feels that it's a rectangle, so I can use all of those rectangle tools. So the next thing I want to do is I want to draw a circle in these four corners. And to do that, I'm going to need to go ahead and choose our Draw Circle tool underneath our Create Vectors section of our Drawing tab. I'm going to make sure that I have a diameter set up of 0.125 an inch. That is the diameter of the tool that I'm going to be using to pocket out some material later on. And that way, as long as I have a circle that's the diameter of that tool or a little bit larger, then I'll be able to get my tool into that hole. So now I'm going to move into my 3D view again, and I'm going to hover over this corner of that offsetted rectangle that we did earlier. And you'll see that as soon as I drag out, I get this virtual line here that pops out. And then I can go ahead and hover over top of this line here, and I can go ahead and find where those intersect, and I can drop my circle. You'll notice that in the edit box, it has the radius. That's because these handles only affect the radius of this tool, not the diameter. Now I'm going to go ahead and press escape on my keyboard. And then I'm going to copy this across my job and then take both of those and copy them again across my job, but vertically instead. So we can do that by going to our Transform Objects section. We can go to our Mirror Selected Objects tool. We're looking at this bit of the form down at the bottom here. We're going to flip horizontally about the job center, and we want to make sure that we create a mirrored copy. So we're going to go ahead and flip across. We'll hold down our Shift key and grab this other one, the original one, and then we'll flip vertical, and then we can press escape again, and we've got those 4 holes that we need. Now that looks pretty good. All we have left to do now is to go ahead and create some tooling. Okay, to set up my toolpaths, I'm going to need to go over to my Toolpaths tab, and to do that, I'm going to click this button right here, and then I'll pop up my Toolpaths tab and close down my Design tab. The first thing we always suggest you do before you actually go and create any toolpaths is to make sure you check your material setup. And this will give you the chance to tell the software how you're going to have your material set up on your machine. The first thing we're going to do is take a look at our material thickness. So this gives you again the opportunity to get a nice accurate measurement for the thickness of your material. And in this case, my material is actually 0.755 inches thick. I am going to set my XY datum to the bottom left-hand corner of my material when I set it up on the machine. I will be zeroing my tool off the top of my material, again, once I get around to doing that at the machine. The rapid Z-gaps above your material is the height the tool needs to move up from the surface of your material so it is safe to move to another location. Be sure that it is a safe height for your machine to move at its maximum speed and not hit anything like hold downs. The plunge option is the gap the tool will move above the surface of your material between plunges. Most of the time, it is equal to the rapid Z-gap number with some exceptions. Refer to the Help menu if you'd like to know more. The XY location and the Z-gap above your material is the absolute position that your tool will start moving from and where the tool can be programmed to return to at the end of a cutting job. You're going to want to make sure that those are safe and appropriate for your machine. Then we can click OK. Now for our first toolpath, we're going to be using a pocket toolpath. So we're going to choose that strategy out of our toolpaths operations. And to do that, I'm going to need a set of closed vectors. So I'm going to marquee select all of the vectors that I'm going to use in this particular toolpath. This toolpath will allow me to remove material from between the text and this inside border, and also anything from the inside of these holes that my tool can get to. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and delete the tool out of my tool list, and I'm going to select a brand new one. This will give me the opportunity to make sure I have my proper material and my proper machine selected. If you haven't gone ahead and set up your machine, then I highly suggest you go ahead at this point and have a look at the video called How to Set Up Your Machine Configuration. In my case, I've already done that. This is going to be cut into hardwood. We'll be using our Shark SD 110, and I'm going to use this end mill right here, this 1/8 inch end mill. As you can see now, the right hand side of this form is now filled with the tool information for the 1/8 inch end mill that I chose. You're going to make sure that all of this is correct and it's safe and appropriate for the material you're cutting into and the machine that you have. And I can go ahead and I can select that. I'm not going to worry about anything about the rest of this Toolpaths dialog right here. If you want more information on that, we have again a great video called How to Use the Pocket Toolpath, which deep dives into all of these different features. But for right now, these are perfectly fine. We're just going to rename that Toolpath Pocket, and we'll click Calculate. And you'll see that now in our 3D view, we have a wireframe of the toolpath that's been created. As always, we would like you to go ahead, and it's always best practice to preview your toolpath in 3D. If you see any problems at this point, now's your time to correct it, because if your machine is set up the way it should be, then those errors will show up there. So we want to make sure that before you get to that stage, everything looks good in the software. So let's preview our visible toolpath, and let's have a look around that to make sure we understand what's happening. You can see the tool pocketing down and removing all kinds of different material. Also getting into these holes properly, like I expected. Let's look back down on the top of our job. As you can see, all of our internal corners of our text are now round. That's because of the geometry of our tool. If we used a smaller tool, we could get a lot more detail into those internal corners if we wanted to. Keeping in mind, it would take a little bit longer to cut. But I'm happy right now using that 1/8 inch end mill. So let's go ahead now and close this down. The next toolpath we're going to create is a profile toolpath. That's to cut this sign out of the piece of material. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and select this outside vector, and then hop into our profile toolpath. We're going to start at the top of our material. We're going to cut all the way down through our material. If I happen to forget what the thickness of my material is, I can just go ahead and delete all the numbers out of there, put in a Z, and then press Tools on my keyboard, and you'll see it will bring up the 0.755 thickness of my material. Nice little top tip for you there. The next thing is I'm going to go ahead and make sure I select the right tool. So we'll select that. It's hardwood, the Shark machine. It's the end mill 1/8 inch. We'll select that. We're going to cut outside this line, which is perfect. We're not going to worry about ramp or plunge moves. We're going to add in some tabs. So we're going to click the Add Tabs button here. A length of 1/2 inch and a thickness of 0.125 inch is perfect. We just need to tell the software where to place those. To do that, we can go ahead and edit our tabs. That'll bring us over to our 2D view. We can go ahead and look straight down on this sheet. We can either go right into the 2D view and drop some tabs in on this vector. But in this case, we're just going to let the software do it automatically. So we're going to add in 4 tabs. We'll add those tabs. We can close that down. Go back to our 3D view again. There's a lot more options in the Profile Toolpath than we've looked at. So if you're interested in those, then I suggest you have a look at a related video called How to Use the Profile Toolpath. Rename our toolpath Cutout. And then we'll calculate that. Then we can preview that visible toolpath and have a look at the results. And you'll see that we cut all the way through our material. There are the tabs. So that should work out just great for us in the end. So let's close down our Preview Toolpaths dialog. The next thing we need to do is save off our toolpaths. So we're going to go ahead and choose the Save Toolpaths option here. We have all kinds of different ways to save off the toolpath, but for us, the easiest way for this first job is to save off all of our visible toolpaths to multiple files. And make sure that we have the proper machine set up, the proper post processor for this machine selected. Make sure we have some toolpaths visible, so we're going to have both of those visible. Then we're just going to choose Save. Now we're going to save these off to our USB drive, and we're going to give these a name. And in a second, I'll show you why we're doing this. We're just going to call this sign, and we'll go ahead and click Save. Let's just go back into the Save Toolpaths option here, and we'll see what's happened. It's gone ahead and saved off those two toolpaths individually. Welcome sign number 1 is Pocket, and welcome sign 2 is Cutout. So not only do we know what project this belongs to, but we also know what order to cut these in. So we can just go ahead and click Cancel there. And I think that's pretty much all that we need.
Okay, I've got my toolpaths all saved off onto my USB drive so I can bring them over to our Next Wave CNC. Now this CNC is an interesting way to interface your USB drive with the actual controller. So we'll need to plug it in the side of the pendant and just load our file from there, which actually is pretty simple and easy to do. But before we do all that, I'm going to need to go ahead and prep my material so that I can fixture it down to the CNC bed that's in a safe way. And so the best way for me to do it for this machine at this current time is use some double-sided tape, really strong double-sided tape on the back of my material, and I can just go ahead and stick that down. So I'm going to prep that up and get it on the CNC machine. Okay, so there we have it. I've got my material securely positioned on my wasteboard of the Next Wave CNC. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and insert in my 1/8 inch end mill tool into the collet, and then we can go ahead and set the machine up like we have told the software it should expect it to be set up. Okay, my next step now is to set my tool over top of my 0 position of my material, just like I set it up in the software. So my XY0 is going to be right here on the corner. So let me do that now. So now that I have that lined up with close to the corner of my material as I could get it, I'm going to go ahead now and zero my tool using this 0 plate, and that way the software or the controller will know how far away the tool is from my material. Normally, this would be the point in my machine setup that I'd put on the dust shoe. Well, this machine, unfortunately, at this time doesn't have a dust shoe, but we've got it inside this nice enclosure here so we can keep all the dust contained and we are safe behind this enclosure. So you'll see throughout these videos, this whole series, that we may or may not choose to use a dust shoe. That's purely because we want you to see what's happening on the machine at that particular time. Not to worry, we're safe, so nothing is going to happen to us. Okay, so let's go ahead now, and I'm gonna plug in this USB drive into the side of this pendant, and we can go ahead and load in our toolpath. Well, there we have it. This might be your very first CNC project you ever cut on your machine. I think it looks pretty good. That was only using one tool and two toolpaths, a pocket and a profile cut. And I think that if you watch that video from the first to the end, you'll have a really good insight into how to get started with your Vectric software. Now in this video, if you remember, what we did is we created this whole sign from scratch, learning all kinds of different tools. And one thing that's great about these videos is you can always go back and re-watch it if you forget something. Now, if you want to know how to take your software to the next level, why don't you tune in for the next video in this Getting Started series, where I'm going to show you how to bring in a large DXF file, so a large vector art file that you may get from a customer, and only cut a very small portion of it as a sample. Can't wait to see you then.